Welcome back. Today on our journey through the Bible, we will learn about Israel's
Jesus
division.
loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong, they are weak, but he is strong. Yes, Jesus loves me, yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me, the Bible tells me so.
A kingdom divided. Our memory verse today comes from Genesis 49:10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. For my servant David's sake. Following the death of Solomon, his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne of Israel. Early in his reign, the men of Israel inquired of him his intentions of leadership. Would he continue the level of taxing his father had initiated, or would he offer some relief? Rehoboam wisely requested some time to consult his advisers. He spoke with the older men who advised his father, and they counseled him to speak kindly to the men and reduce the burden on the people. Then he consulted with young friends with whom he grew up, who advised him to deal harshly with the people and to show his power. Upon return to the men of Israel, Rehoboam followed the advice of his young friends and told the men that he would even amplify the strain his father had laid on them. With that, the men of Israel revolted. Jeroboam, a former servant of King Solomon's, who had been in exile in Egypt for challenging Solomon, was now in Israel leading this revolt. God had informed Jeroboam that he would be given the leadership of 10 of the tribes of Israel. Following the conflict, as God had said, Jeroboam was now king of the northern 10 tribes of Israel, and Rehoboam, for David's sake, remained king over the southern 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, with the Levites remaining with the temple in Jerusalem. The now divided kingdom was constantly at odds with each other. However, in observance of the annual feasts, the people of the northern kingdom, Israel, had to journey to the southern kingdom, Judah, in order to perform the religious ceremonies. This concerned Jeroboam very much, despite the message he received from God that the northern kingdom was his. He feared that their regular return to Rehoboam's territory would cause the people to dethrone him and take Rehoboam as their king again. So, Jeroboam built a new altar in Bethel and initiated a new way of worship in opposition to God's expectations, leading the people of the northern kingdom into apostasy. The disobedient prophet. God sent a prophet from the land of Judah to Jeroboam to rebuke him for leading Israel into false worship. While the king was offering burnt sacrifices on the altar he built, God sent a messenger with a message for him. The message from God promised that a king of Judah named Josiah was to be born, and he would desecrate the new altar, burning the priests that officiated in this new worship on the altar. As a sign that this would occur, the prophet said that the altar would break open and the ashes in it would fall out. In anger, the king stretched out his arm, ordering his guards to apprehend God's prophet. Immediately, his hand withered so that he could not bring it back down. At the same time, the altar broke open and all the ashes fell out, just as the prophet had said. Jeroboam was now afraid. He begged the prophet to pray to God to have his hand restored to him. The prophet prayed, and the king's hand was restored. He then invited the prophet to come to his home to rest and receive a gift. The prophet told him that he couldn't stay for food or drink or any gift that the king would offer. God had told him to go straight home when he had completed his task. God had commanded the messenger to go home via a different route, and he was not to stop anywhere for food or drink. While sitting under an oak tree on his way home, the prophet of God was met by another old prophet from Bethel, who had heard of his visit to Jeroboam. The old prophet invited him home to eat and rest. The prophet from Judah told him that he was admonished by God to go straight home. The old prophet insisted that he turn into his house, telling the man that he too was a prophet, and an angel had come to him with a message that he was to stop by his house for food and rest. The prophet believed him and went to the old prophet's house. While at the old prophet's home eating and drinking, a message came from God to the old prophet for the messenger from Judah, telling him that because of his disobedience in going to the old prophet's home, he would die in the way and not make it back home to Judah. After he had eaten, the prophet of God borrowed a donkey from the old prophet and continued on his way home. As he was going in the path, a lion came out and killed him. The old prophet found his body, the donkey, and the lion standing in the way. He carried the prophet's body on the donkey back to Bethel and buried him in his own grave. Now it's time for our activity. First question: who was Solomon's son that became king? That's right, Rehoboam became king after Solomon died. Next question: how was Israel divided? That's correct. Rehoboam treated the people harshly, so 10 tribes followed Jeroboam in the north, and 2 tribes remained with Rehoboam in the south. Why was all of Israel not given completely to Jeroboam? That's right. God had promised King David that Israel would have a king from his family forever. Now write or say the memory verse from memory.
Yes, Jesus loves
Next
me.
time, we'll read about
Yes,
life in the
Jesus
northern
loves
kingdom.
me. Yes, Jesus loves me, for the Bible tells me so.